What if I told you the first metal band that hit #1 got buried, not by drugs or grunge, but by the own singer's mouth? Here's how Kevin Dubrow burned the empire down, one quote at a time.
Like, subscribe, thank you.
And Quiet Riot weren't just riding a wave, they were the wave. In 1983, they bulldozed past every gatekeeper with Metal Health, a record that didn't just chart, it actually sucker punched Thriller off the top. First metal album to hit #1. History made. Suddenly the floodgates opened for every Sunset Strip band with a can of hairspray and a Marshall stack. But while the industry scrambled to cash in on the next Quiet Riot, the band itself was busy lighting a match to everything they had just built. At the center of the blaze, Kevin Dubrow, loud, cocky, and chemically fearless. His mouth moved faster than his brain, and he made sure that everybody knew exactly what he thought of them. This is not a comeback story. This is the slow-motion car crash that followed the greatest chart-topping ambush in metal history, and how the guy behind the wheel made damn sure it couldn't last. Now, to get why the fall hurt so bad, you gotta look at how high they were flying. The so-called classic lineup, Dubrow on vocals, Carlos Cavazo on guitar, Rudy Sarzo on bass, Frankie Banali on the drums, wasn't a first draft. This was the second shot, the one that they were not supposed to get. The first version of Quiet Riot had Randy Rhoads, but even with that magic, they couldn't lock down a US deal. And by the time Rhoads left for Ozzy and then died in '82, the original dream was ashes. But Kevin Dubrow, he didn't quit, he built a new machine. Leaner, meaner, starving, and that hunger exploded with Metal Health. And their set at the 1983 US Festival hit like a bomb. They walked on that stage as misfits and left as icon. And Come On Feel the Noise, a track they hated so much they tried to tank it in the studio, wound up being the anthem that shoved them into every living room in America. They had it all. And then Dubrow started swinging a bat at it like it owed him money. So as Metal Health steamrolled through radio stations and record stores, Kevin Dubrow's ego didn't just inflate, it was totally weaponized. He had a mic, a spotlight, and zero brakes. Confidence turned to cockiness, cockiness into open warfare. He torched bridges like it was a day job. The LA metal scene, the Quiet Riot, had helped crack wide open. Dubrow treated it like a knockoff flea market. Instead of seeing peers, he saw parasites. He called them hacks. Said they were riding Quiet Riot's coattails. And when that wasn't enough, he went for the throat. They can't fucking play. That quote was not off the cuff, it was a full-on declaration, and the rest of the scene heard it loud and clear. Dubrow was basically launching a full-scale verbal blitzkrieg. New bands, old legends, friends, mentors, didn't matter. If they had a name, he had a shot to take. And then he crossed a line nobody expected him to touch. He went after Ozzy Osbourne, the same Ozzy that gave Randy Rhoads his big break, the same Ozzy who pulled Rudy Sarzo into the big leagues. Dubrow didn't flinch. He called Ozzy's voice frog-like. That was the word, frog. You got to remember, folks, this was the age before social media, so things like that were a pretty big freaking deal. And in a scene built in loyalty and brotherhood, it hit like a sucker punch. Not just disrespect, but a full-on betrayal. People in the industry didn't just hear it, they felt it, and they didn't forget. And the rest of Quiet Riot, well, they stood there like survivors at a demolition site, watching the frontman torch everything they had built, one quote at a time. Frankie Banali, the steady hand behind the kit, later summed it up like a man who'd just seen way too much. Kevin's brutal honesty came with a price, which Quiet Riot paid for dearly, and that bill just kept on piling up. Rudy Sarzo, the soft-spoken, diplomatic to a fault, bass player, got stuck with the cleanup duty, constantly smoothing things over, offering half-hearted excuses, praying each outburst wouldn't be the one that finished them. But the pressure inside the group was already reaching combustion. They weren't just fighting the press anymore, they were fighting each other. And the guy leading the charge was the same one holding the mic. Years later, Kevin Dubrow looked back with something close to clarity. He said, I basically took a target, aimed it around my foot, and shot. He said that pretty much like a guy reading his own autopsy report. He knew that he had nuked some bridges there, poisoned relationships, and dragged his own career through the mud. But that version of him, the self-aware one, didn't exist in the mid-'80s. Back then, it was full throttle, into the wall. The backlash hit fast. Radio stations stopped picking them up. Bands that once shared dressing rooms wouldn't return calls. The buzz they had earned from Metal Health, historic, game-changing buzz, evaporated almost overnight. Quiet Riot were not rising stars anymore. They were radioactive. But the shitstorm inside the band and the industry freeze out outside, it seeped straight into the music. With Metal Health still burning hot, the label shoved them right back in the studio like they were printing money on a deadline. What came out in 1984 was Condition Critical, and the title said it all. Half the songs were scraps from the last album. The energy was definitely way down, the spark totally snuffed. In a move that reeked of panic, they tried the Slade trick again with Mama We're All Crazy Now, and it charted, but no one was blown away. It felt like deja vu with the volume turned down. The record still moved over 1 million copies, enough for platinum, but next to Metal Health's 6 million haul, it landed like a wet fart. The press slapped it with a cruel label, platinum failure. Quiet Riot were not the future anymore. They're looking like the past. And if Condition Critical was the misstep, QR3 was the face-first skid across broken glass. Dropped in 86, the album ditched everything that made Quiet Riot Quiet Riot. That grit, the bite, the raw metal backbone, it was all buried under layers of glossy synths and hollow production. They weren't chasing a new sound, they were basically running from themselves. Metalheads bailed. Pop fans never showed up. The whole thing flatlined, peaking at a sad little number 31 on the charts, and leaving behind 0 hits, 0 momentum, and 0 reason to keep believing. It wasn't just a bad album, it was a broadcast of a band in total freefall. No direction, grip, or clue. A train record through and through. And behind the wheel, Kevin Dubrow, still unraveling. And the wheels came off hardest on the road. In 1986, Quiet Riot hit the tour circuit with Poison, who, as you know, is a glam metal power keg still on the rise at that time. And it wasn't just a billing, it was a before and after photo in real time. Every night, the crowd roared louder and louder for the opener. Every night, that gap was getting wider. Quiet Riot were slipping, and they knew it. And Dubrow, he made sure everybody else knew it too. The band and their handlers pulled power plays, tightened dressing room access, cut sound checks, played games like high school bullies with a headlining slot. Poison played nice until they didn't. One night, the simmer snapped. Dubrow's tour manager reportedly had Poison and their crew physically tossed into the snow. Not a figure of speech, thrown out like trash into the cold. It was rock-bottom theater, washed-up headliners picking a fight with their replacements. And that moment said it all. The torch wasn't being passed, it was actually being ripped away. And the center could not hold. Rudy Sarzo, the soft-spoken buffer between Dubrow and Total Chaos, finally had enough. In January 85, he walked straight into Ozzy's camp. No press release could mask what that meant. The glue was gone. The rest kept going, but it was a shell. No pulse or spark, just damage control. And by early 87, the band and their management reached the nuclear option. They fired Kevin. Fired the guy who was Quiet Riot. The guy who named it. It was a total Steve Jobs move. Built it and burned it. They blamed the drugs, the late nights, the unworkable bullshit that made recording and touring a war zone. Just like that, he was out. They brought in Paul Shortino, cut one last album in 88, and it went nowhere. The lights dimmed, curtain fell, and by 89, Quiet Riot was gone. Not with a bang, but with a confused, desperate whimper. And the years that followed were bleak for Dubrow. A purgatory of blown calls and missed chances. Eventually, he clawed his way back, dragging Quiet Riot out of the grave in the early 90s. Cavazo and Bonelli rejoined, and they kept grinding. And in 1997, the full Metal Health lineup reassembled, at the bizarre request of Marilyn Manson, who wanted them for one of his parties. That's how far they had fallen, summoned like a novelty act by a guy who used to get banned from malls. And they hit the club circuit. No more arenas, no more limos, just weekend warriors playing for nostalgia-drunk crowds and a cut of the bar tab. They dropped Guilty Pleasures in 2001, and then Rehab in 2006, an album nobody noticed, but Frankie Bonelli would later call it his favorite. And you could hear why. His drums didn't just hit, they totally roared. Bonham power, studio clarity, criminally underrated. Quiet Riot was alive again, technically, but they were a museum piece. Still moving and swinging, but frozen in time. The last page in Kevin Dubrow's story got written on November 25th, 2007. He was 52, found dead alone in his Las Vegas home. Cocaine overdose. Accidental, they said. But anyone who'd watched the arc of his life knew that the ending had been circling for years. That same chaos that got him fired in 87 never really left. The outbursts, spirals, the need to torch every bridge he crossed, they all came back around. This wasn't a rock star dying young. This was a man outlasted by his own demon. A career of sky-high triumphs and brutal, avoidable crashes sealed with a whisper instead of a bang. But Quiet Riot's name didn't die with Dubrow. In the years that followed, Frankie Bonelli, drummer, survivor, the last true steward of the band's legacy, picked up the pieces. The 2015 documentary, Quiet Riot, well, now you're here, there's no way back, laid it all bare. The grief and doubt, the impossible task of finding somebody to fill a voice that was equal parts iconic and radioactive. But Frankie pushed on, kept the band alive, gig by gig, city by city, until cancer took him in 2020. But before he went, he made sure one thing was clear. Music should live. And so it does. But the story that built it is two-sided. On one side, Quiet Riot was a sledgehammer that cracked open the mainstream for metal. On the other, they were a masterclass in implosion. How arrogance, unchecked ego, and a refusal to shut the hell up can torch a dynasty before it even settles in. Kevin Dubrow had the pipes, the presence, definitely the fire. But the biggest battle he ever fought wasn't with the industry or the critics, it was with himself. He broke through every barrier in front of him, and then he set fire to the stage and danced in the ashes. To my subscribers, thank you so much. What can I say, but you are freaking awesome. If you haven't had a chance to subscribe yet, give that subscribe button a good smack in the kisser. And while you're at it, reach over and give the like button a good smack as well. Join the family. I want to thank you so much for watching.